Hello everyone, once again, Adam, back for another Car Talks before a car pulls right in front of me. One of these days, Chris, right, I should probably get a hold of, not let my insurance guy see these videos, but anyway, so today I want this Car Talk to be about the job title of infrastructure developer. We all probably know what a software developer is. A software developer, the title has been around for decades. It was a computer programmer at one time. Nowadays it's a software developer. Basically about writing code to develop software and applications that then get used by users. It's a pretty common term. However, infrastructure developer is not so common and very recent, actually. So, previously a software developer would write code to deliver a piece of software, an application on top of infrastructure. So, infrastructure is a server, a SAN, a network, any kind of the traditionally hardware-based products. Now, when before virtualization came around, everything was hardware and infrastructure. We had physical servers, we had physical SANs, we had physical, everything was physical. Nothing was virtualized, and so there's no way you could be an infrastructure developer. You couldn't actually write code to develop a quote unquote software infrastructure. But nowadays, with virtualization and all these different configuration management tools and the term configuration or infrastructure as code, things have changed quite a bit. And what you'll see is a job title now of infrastructure developer. So an infrastructure developer now is basically a position that treats code, you still write code, but instead of building an application, you are orchestrating infrastructure. So what I mean by that is, you, instead of writing a piece of code to a new feature to an app, to a web app, a web part or something like that on a screen that a user can see, instead maybe you're adding in another server to mix, or maybe to an environment that application then sits on top of. So maybe, to give you an example of the full stack, how this may work, let's say that a software developer is working on a web application that that stores employee records or something like that. That web application has some requirements in order to run. You can't run software in the ether. Well, maybe if you talk about Azure Functions or AWS Lambda or something like that, but you need some kind of server or infrastructure underneath it to do that. That's what an infrastructure developer would build. So you have your web app. Your web app consists of a bunch of files that are hosted on a website. So first of all, you need your website. If it's an IIS, maybe you need your applications or application pools, all those things. You need IIS itself, install the service, the World Wide Web Publishing Service. You need a web server to put all this stuff on. Underneath that, you need the operating system, so you need Windows. Windows runs below that. Beneath that, maybe you have the virtual machine to do that. And then underneath that, you have the hypervisor host, which is when you finally start getting into hardware. So the infrastructure developer develops the code to programmatically provision all of the stuff from the hypervisor host, maybe, to the virtual machine, to Windows, the operating system, to IIS, to the website application, the application pools. It's all kind of a stack that all goes all the way up. And then eventually the software developer comes in and puts the cherry on top, which is the actual application. So, if you can think about it, it's kind of like an app sandwich, I'd like to kind of call it. The app sandwich is the infrastructure guy is always stuck on the bottom here because he has to develop all the infrastructure and all the coordination that it takes to provision the automatically provision all these dependencies for this application. And then those software developer guys, they just come in and put the cherry on the top, and they get all the all the credit. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of what an infrastructure developer is. In my full-time role, I'm an infrastructure developer, and I also do DevOps things. The infrastructure developer job title does have a lot to do with DevOps. It's all about automating all this together. So I'm working now on a project that will allow us to essentially build out an app and have all of the infrastructure combined in it all together. So, if you think about it, the infrastructure is just an app dependency. It's just a dependency that for the app to run. If you want to just be completely independent of where you want to put this, you need to kind of build all that logic inside of one package. So, for example, I'm now working on a web app that will allow you just essentially run one PowerShell command, install application, pointed at a particular environment that maybe has an Active Directory domain set up, and something like that. And then once you point at a particular environment, it would then go through and check all the way up from the virtual machine layer all the way up to the application itself. So if that environment doesn't have the virtual machine it needs, it builds the virtual machine. If the operating system isn't right, it installs the operating system, gets everything configured. This IS keeps checking. Do you have all these dependencies? And keeps adding them one by one until all the dependencies are met, and then finally the web application is deployed. And this allows you to version not only just your application itself, but the infrastructure that comes with this. This is the one good thing about Docker. We're not using Docker yet, but this is the one good thing about Docker that allows you to sort of package up all that stuff. Traditionally a web application has just been, well, here's a bunch of files, or maybe here's a database, and this is what we're going to package up and version all in one. That's not technically true, because you're always going to have some kind of infrastructure laying underneath that, and you're not versioning that. Well, what if your IIS site that the application depending on changes? You're not versioning it, so you change it. Your app's had no idea that your site has changed. Just things like that. But yeah, so infrastructure developer is a really cool job title. I think it's a really valid job title, and it's one that if you really enjoy automation and configuration management and that sort of thing, it's a really cool job title to have, and I highly recommend it. Even though we don't get quite the press that those software developer guys do, it's okay. They can't do it without us.